Hello. So if I could just get you to introduce yourself here.
Yes, my name is Jose Sanabria.
Jose and I talk a lot about religion. And I kind of wanted to get your idea of like, where does your religion come into your life the most?
My I don't want to call it religion, my spiritual um relationship. Because religion is man-made, but when you have a spiritual connection, it's like a relationship. There's a love that you're connected, and you're is a bond.
Right. You can develop it.
Yes, it's a development.
Okay. Where would you say that relationship gives you the most strength? Where do you derive the most strength from that relationship?
When I'm at my weakest, when I'm on my knees, when I'm down and out, I that's when I get my strength.
Okay. So we also talk a lot about your music. How would you say, if at all, does your spirituality, this relationship that you have with God, and how does this relationship fuel your music?
The way it fuels my music is the energy that I receive from above, and it drives into what I do. And when I do, it's something that comes out, an energy that comes out positive. We all know that in physics, there's the positive and negative. So there's a connection when you get those two going together. And when you get those two going together, you drive, and it shows when other people hear it, because it gives you that gratification that you did something and they enjoying. So if you did something right, it's gonna be a ripple effect.
Right. So would you say that you draw inspiration from your beats, from like things that you hear in everyday life? Does it just come to you, or do you kind of have a plan when you sit down and do these things?
It's a little bit of both. I try to be organized and when I do things, but mostly it's an emotional. Sometimes I've been going through something real hard, and that's when I notice when I'm real at my worst, that's when my best come out. And that's when you see, if you see it in a lot of people in games or in anything we do in life, when you find yourself, okay, I'm against that cross and that. So when you find that crossroad, that you be like, okay, this is where I need. That's where it comes out.
Right.
It's just like supernatural. Sometimes you can explain it. It's like love. You can't understand it, but it just comes out, and you'll be like, okay, yes, because you just know it and feel it.
Right.
It's like an emotional thing. Like there's things in life that are created now, not that don't have that feeling that human being have,
Right.
like computers, electronics, machines.
Right. It doesn't give you that same like, face to face interaction.
Yes.
Right, the human interaction. So that being said, would you say that your music is a way for you to reach out to people and to touch people, or would you say that your music is a way for you to get in touch with yourself and your spiritual side?
It more, it's more of me touching other people, because my emotion will dictate how you will perceive it. And when I say you perceive it as a human being, it's gonna relate to it.
Right.
So it's about almost a relationship. I'm having a conversation with you through my music without me saying something to you, but you're feeling my energy. You're feeling what I'm feeling at that moment.
Right. And that plays back into the storytelling kind of aspect of music, and being able to touch people spiritually with music in a way that, you might not be able to do in other ways.
Yes, it does affect, and that is right. Sometimes I might not have the moment, the words to express to you how I feel, but the music just let you know at that moment how I really feel, because it just put that smile that you just want to go out there and be like, yes, 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 yes,
Right.
go get it.
Yeah.
And that's,
Just kind of put you in that dancing mood.
yeah. Okay, let's go for it.
Right, right.
The Tony the Tiger, that eye of the tiger
Right.
in you.
And so in a way, your music connects to you spiritually and human and on human emotion,
Yes.
because it allows you to get in touch with that side of yourself that's like, all right, let's get
Yeah,
it
the
done.
intellectual side. Okay,
Right.
because at the moment you're thinking about all the problems. You're not thinking all the problems of the world. You're just thinking about, okay, I feel this way. I want to translate this energy and pass it on to somebody else, because we can relate. Some days, we have that good going energy, and
Right.
sometimes we need that pep, like
Yeah.
a Pepsi or
Right.
energy drink.
Right. So, is there any questions that I didn't ask you that you want, the people to know?
Yes, and there's a type of two music. There's the type of music that brings you up, and the type of music that brings you down. My energy is to bring people up, for the simple fact, as much as daily life we go through hustles, we go through ordeals. This way the energy just resonate and makes you want to. I got another coworker who every time be like, Jose, do you got something? And when I do bring it, it just makes him his day as well go. And his name, can I name a person?
Sure, if you like.
His name is Andy. So I got my coworker as well that enjoy every time that I bring something to the table.
Do you mind introducing yourself?
Amanda Corella.
So tell me more about what it was like for you when you started reading to your kids, and how do you think that helped them to be ahead of the game now? And
So it was instilled in me when I was pregnant with my kids, that from their doctors, that it was very important to start reading when they were in the womb, because they can hear and feel the vibrations.
right.
So, I mean, ever since I was a couple months pregnant, I was reading to them. I'd get all these little tchotchke kid nursery rhymes, and every single night I would read like I was putting them to bed. And then after they were born, I kept up with it. Every single night I would read them a book when they were babies. And then as they turned into toddlers, they would sit in my lap, and I would have them turn the pages as I was reading to keep them engaged. And of course, the books for that age group had lots of pictures. So we would pause on a page and talk about the picture and how it correlated to the story, just to keep them totally into it. And I think that helped them want to keep reading, because it was fun. I made it fun. It wasn't a chore and boring. So as they grew up, they continued to want to read, which helped them read at an early age. So my son and daughter both could read by the age of 5. They didn't learn it in school; they learned it at home. So when they were in school, they were already ahead of everybody in the class, and they're now at the top of the charts of reading for their level.
Do you think that engagement makes a difference?
For sure, absolutely, because it makes them want to do more of it.
Right. Do you think that the reason that they are ahead now, and the reason why they're doing so well, is because of the way that you would read to them and the way that you would engage with them?
Probably, I would think so. It probably has a lot to do with it, and also obviously the level of the story that they have their likes. I mean, my daughter likes like fairy books, and my son likes like adventurous books. So they have their niche that they like to read, but that probably did have a lot to do with it also.
Um, this is just kind of a curiosity thing. Are they two different people, or
Yes.
are they very similar?
Very, very different.
That's funny.
Mm-hmm.
And so which one's the youngest?
My daughter Maya is 8, and my son Caleb is 9.
Do they like play with each other? Are they fighters?
They do. No, they get along very well. They're very, very close.
That's awesome.
They're just getting to the stage where they'll argue a little bit, and I'm just like, guys, really? Are we doing this right now? And then they'll stop.
Right.
I'm like, is it worth it? Do we really want to listen to each other arguing?
Right. So how would you correlate or translate the engagement that you try to apply with your children into like a workplace atmosphere?
Well, not only workplace but school for them. So I make sure I tell them all the time, you need to be actively listening, not just sitting there zoning out. You need to be paying attention to what's said, and that would go for a workplace too. When your boss is giving you instruction on what to do, it would all correlate.
Right. Um, so we talked about cancel culture.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit more about that and why you think it's important to stop and talk about it instead of just saying, "Oh, we don't like this person."
Right. Just because it offends you doesn't mean it didn't happen, and it doesn't need to be brought up. Because if it offends you, then I would think it would be more apt that we need to bring it up so it doesn't continue to happen, to
Right.
stop that um, from continuing. So just because you don't agree with it, there's probably more people that don't agree with it too, but they want to talk about it so our younger generation doesn't repeat history that did happen.
Right. Right. That did happen.
Correct.
So additionally too, do you think that learning happens on both sides as far as the person who would quote unquote be canceled and the people who are projecting that canceled onto them?
I would hope so.
Right.
I would hope so.
And then kind of bouncing off of that, like, how do you think, what do you think the best way of that education could happen?
On the side of
Either one.
I don't know. And that's the hard part, because everybody cries, I'm offended, but how do you get them to understand, so what, you're offended, it doesn't mean that we don't need to talk about it. I don't know. I can't say as I'm the best one to figure out that problem.
Right. Right. All right. Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Dyllan. I work at Home Depot with Ray.
So, we're talking about storytelling. What's one of the ways that you were influenced as a kid by media? And it could be a book or a movie or music.
Mostly music. When I was studying really hard at night, I'd put on music and just jam out while I was studying. And then I'd use the beats to remember the flashcards in my head. And I'd just play the beats over again.
Did you find that helped you do well on tests?
Pretty well, yeah. I mean, it's what I still do today with flashcards, where I listen to music while I do them, and then I hum the tune, and then at certain points of the beat, it just comes back to me.
So has that changed at all today? Like, so obviously you said that you still do that form of memory recall, but as far as like being influenced by books or music, like what's one of the ways that you're influenced today by storytelling? And that could just be like books and music or
I tend to take away aspects of stories that really how do I describe it? Stuff that resonates with me a lot, I'll take away and I'll try to decipher why it resonates with me. And then once I figure that out, it makes me enjoy the story more. But it usually takes me a couple rewatches of a story. I do enjoy watching. I do enjoy watching stories that are more, like, I don't know, the lighthouse, stuff like that. Not pretentious, but weird and crazy, because I remember them better.
okay, this is kind of unrelated, but have you seen The Fantastic Planet?
I have not.
Okay. It's kind of weird, fantastic kind of shit like that. So that's pretty cool. But so when you talk about like news and media, would you say that news is accurate to telling current what's going on currently, and then would you say it's also good at becoming a representation of history?
Oh, currently, I don't see news as accurate to what's going on. Usually, I'll go to 3 or 4 different sources. I'll go to all the mainstream stuff. I'll go to the more sideline stuff. I try not to go to one source, because a lot of times nowadays it's a little more biased. I do enjoy reading about other. I do enjoy reading other point of views as well in terms of news. Um, and that I think that it's not going to be remembered as an accurate representation later down the line. Right now, maybe, but later down the line, they're going to have to fish through a lot and like decipher through a lot of dumb articles that don't really have anything to do with what was actually happening.
Right. Do you think that, like, have you ever heard of The Onion?
Yes,
Do you think that that would play a role in the way that upcoming generations get taught history?
I do appreciate what The Onion does in terms of parody. I know right now they're kind of controversial because they are parody and people are saying that people are getting confused with it. I don't think it'll be taught as history. I think they're more of a satire site than anything. And I just don't think that they would. I think they'll stand the test of times in terms of their jokes, but in terms of like, oh, they're going to be added to history, I don't think so. I think it'll still be the big competitors like MSN and uh, CNN and Fox and all those.
Right. So, in terms of the upcoming generation, I know you want kids. Do you think that the way that you understand history and the points of view in media that you consume now will impact the way that you raise them as well?
Yes, I plan on not giving them unrestricted internet access until they're older myself. Growing up as a kid on the internet, um, I know what you can find on there, and I know what media, like, there's so many lies and such on the media or in the internet, and I don't want them to have to, like, I had to sort that out myself. I don't want them to go through that, but I'm not going to force them into my thinking in terms, I'm not going to make them read the same stuff I read. If they want to read an article I disagree with, more power to them. Um,
So going off of that, do you think that um, it can be impactful to for 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 kids or the upcoming generation, however you want to look at it, for kids now to be able to hear perspectives from adults and kind of either adopt them or like adopt that perspective, or do you think it's better for them to form their own opinion?
I think it's mostly better for them to form their own. As much as I'd love to have a mini me running around, that's not what that's not how you're supposed to raise a child. And you can and you can give them your life experiences and talk to them about what you've learned growing up and how you acted and so and so, but you shouldn't be like, this is how you should act. They should develop that for themselves.
And kind of going back to how you said that you were raised on the internet, kind of, we talked about rated R movies and stuff like that.
Mm.
Do you think that that had an impact on who you are now?
Oh yeah, I mean, nowadays I it seeing all that, because I was allowed to watch a lot of not good movies when I was like 10-ish growing up.
Would you
Around
say
that
it?
age.
Sorry, would you say it almost desensitized you?
Oh, pretty much, yeah. Like when I was younger, I would watch rated R movies full of blood and gore with my dad, and now my friends are like, "Oh my god, did you see this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I guess." I mean, it's daily. I mean, it's some places. I'm just kind of more accepting of the fact that it just kind of happens in some places nowadays, even if it's not good.
Right. Do you think that will also impact the way that upcoming generations are raised? Like almost not yeah, almost desensitized to what's going on in the world with gore and war and all that kind
Well,
of stuff.
yeah, because we grew up with Afghanistan and Iraq, and they broadcast that stuff all over the news, and we grew up to be more desensitized. And now that that's more normalized, of showing war footage and death on the news, like the other day, I saw uh, two Russian guys get bombed, and they were acting like it was totally a-okay, but it's so desensitized now that it's just it's kind of everywhere, you know.
Hmm.
Like on the streets, people are getting more rough and rowdy, and I think that's one of the major causes. And I think it will desensitize future generations, and I think they do it with not just violence, with anything really. Like right now, they're trying to bugs get people to eat the bugs,
Oh yeah.
and I think that's really funny.
It's like kind of like the Tide Pod thing that happened.
Yeah, it's like the bug burger, and
Yeah.
you know, I get it. They want to cut down on natural gas and stuff. understandable, but not for me.
Yeah. Um, would would you say that, or do you have any ideas, or and they don't have to be grand scale or anything, but do you have any methods of combating that? Do you think that there's a way that we can, kind of raise the upcoming generation, or teach the upcoming generation ways to kind of get around the fact that everything seems to be so poor in the country, in our country specifically? But
They're like like I said earlier, when I said I was not gonna give my kids unrestricted internet access until later. There's nothing you can, even then, there's nothing I can really do about that. So no matter what, they're gonna see what they're gonna see. Um, I don't think there's a way to brace them against it, and I'd rather just not brace them anyways, because I don't want them to grow up with a false sense of this is how the world should be. Why isn't it like this? Um, they should see the world for what it really is, and I don't. I'm not a big fan of sugarcoating it, because then you get too comfortable in your own environment, and you try to force that environment on people who've never had that life. I don't think you should sugarcoat the world, because then people try to force their life onto people who have never experienced something like that before. So even though you can try to stop them, it'll be hard to stop them from, like, you can bring them, you can give them everything they want, but they'll still see it and they'll still react to it. There's no way to brace them for it.
awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
So if I could just have you introduce yourself.
All right, my name is Holland Hodak, and I'm an assistant professor of jewelry and metalsmithing at Nazareth College.
Okay, and jumping right into it, how do you think the world can use storytelling to bridge misunderstanding and cultivate the upcoming generation's understanding of history?
So, storytelling bridges understanding through empathy, and it allows people to see the world from different vantage points that provide alternative conceptions to what is possible. So, without storytelling, I feel we are bound to fall into status quo thinking, and that we would end up just reproducing the same problems that actually haunt us today. To me, that would be my pretty straightforward answer on that one.
I really like that answer. How do you think we can tell stories in unconventional or different ways?
So this was kind of our conversation prior to jumping into this interview. So as an artist, I feel like that's already a very unconventional way of telling storytelling. So I guess to kind of go back and say your question over, as an artist, I tell stories in unconventional ways just through my art. My artwork is the story, and I express it through visual language. So for me, as a maker, a little bit of a background on myself and what kind of led me to medical science into my work is that growing up, I was a competitive gymnast for many years. And I believe it was that intense awareness of my body. And, it really led me to focus on my own physicality. So having that experience in my life, coming into, my artistic career as a BFA student and as an MFA student, I wanted to focus on that physicality. So in graduate school, I was making work that would reconfigure, alter, or morph the body into alternative positions. And these apparati would kind of, structure the body in different type of orientations. And it wasn't until my final year that my work started to medically imply historical medical devices and or implants in the muscle structure of the body. So I started having interviews and studio visits with doctors, with orthopedic surgeons. I started making connections within the medical community, and my research really took off from there. So it's actually through that medical research, working with doctors, the medical community, that I started making work that revolves around medical science, and that's really kind of my unconventional way of how my work led into storytelling and diving deeper into my own medical experiences and those as others. Because again, storytelling leads to empathy and how we relate to one another. And we all have bodies, so we can all relate because, 9 out of 10, we all know somebody who's had a surgery.
or who, you know, has seen a doctor who's gone through a traumatic experience. It's just something we can all relate to.
I'm going to ask you a follow-up question.
Okay.
Do you think that your work plays into some like, I don't want to say fantasy because it's all rooted in fact, but do you bring in any kind of fantastical nature into your art when you produce?
I actually do, and I'll talk about that in a couple follow-up questions here. But actually, one of my bodies of work is titled Hyperbolic. And I guess long story short, I'm also a hypochondriac. I'm a low-key hypochondriac, but I'm a hypochondriac nonetheless. Like, I shouldn't go online and read anything on WebMD because I'm a person who thinks that I will have it. So I kind of play off of whether it's fantastical or not, but I like to bring a playfulness into the work, whether I'm making implants or devices, because there's such a fear of going to the doctors. It's actually called white coat syndrome. So some people will have to take their blood pressure again at the end of a hospital visit or after seeing a doctor just because their nerves have calmed down. So yeah, I do bring in that playful aspect, kind of like you create these menacing objects, yet, you know, they're keeping you at bay, yet enticing enough to draw you in. So maybe they're, you know, it gives you maybe a lack of fear for objects that so many people can relate to.
Right. So what are some ways that storytelling serves to create understanding? Has there ever been a time when someone else's method of storytelling influenced your own?
Yeah, so when I use storytelling to create understanding not only through my own experience, I use it or other medical stories from others that actually help inform my art, but also through my journey of actually forming all of my medical partnerships and learning about the political nature of the medical field. All of that has profoundly impacted me as an artist and, you know, how I approach my work. So politically speaking, and you know, through my medical affiliations, I actually formed numerous partnerships over the years, some of which include the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, Cleveland Clinic, and MedWish International. And kind of funny, I mean, it took a lot of time, but they actually, over time, donated, no joke, hundreds upon hundreds of medical implants and devices to me. So in my studio at home, I have like legit hip replacements, heart valves, stents, to prosthetic legs, to penile implants, breast implants. I mean, like the list goes on. I actually kind of make a joke that I'm Mary Shelley in my studio about to build Frankenstein. You know, it's like something I shouldn't even tell people. Like, you're worried that they're going to come like loot my house of like all my medical supplies, which is kind of terrifying. But receiving them was really like no easy task because, right, you can't walk into a hospital and be like, hey, do you have an extra hip replacement laying around? You know, they're going to be like, who is this person? Why is she asking for this? So it took a ton of written proposals, a lot of phone calls. The paperwork that I had to sign was kind of like a story in and of itself.
Right.
Like, I had to sign a form that I would not sell any of the donations on the black market. I had to sign a form that I would not melt any of the donations down for material cost, because the implants that I received, some of them are actually pure silver because the body actually will correspond with it, and or titanium. I had to sign a form that I would not perform surgery on anybody with the objects that were donated to me. But for me, the real kicker was signing a form that I would not perform surgery on anybody with the objects that I make myself. So that was kind of like a shock and very surprising to me. But I mean, I understand why the medical field would have me do that. So I mean, that in and of itself, you know, reinforces the power that medical implants have. That's kind of like embodying a story, you know, into these objects that are then going to go into, you know, somebody's body. And I think it's really interesting, you know, whether Eastern or Western, first world or the so-called third world, that not everybody has access to medical facilities or can afford these type of surgeries. It's really, you know, a luxury and a privilege that so many people don't even realize, you know, that they have. And, you know, you start to hear about these horrific stories that really go on, you know, back alleyway surgeries that have gone terribly wrong, of people trying to get medical access where they can't afford it or go to a hospital. They show up on the news or even on the show Botched, where people are being injected with concrete or cement as cheaper alternatives to plastic surgery or to surgeries. or even politically what's happening right now with the Supreme Court in Roe versus Wade, and stripping people of abortions or stripping people of just their basic health care, to medical trucks being hijacked or looted, things ending up on the black market, to unfortunately like trafficking, death, and murder as well. So those things, I think, are always going on in my mind because it's happening all the time, all throughout the world, and it's just something that we don't necessarily think of right away. So it's those type of stories, that I'm sharing with you on the news, working with doctors, with orthopedic surgeons, or even in a gallery or museum when people are approaching me with my own work. It's pretty incredible how, people will start to open up and share their own medical stories. Mic down. Share their own medical stories with me. And all of those things I take into consideration when going about making my work. I guess I can share one specific story that really did resonate with me because it really brings home the amount of privilege that so many people here in the States have with regard to, medical access. And it was a conversation I had with an orthopedic surgeon who does a lot of humanitarian trips all over the world. And this one trip happened to be down in Panama, and he was there to perform, X amount of hip replacements within a short period of time. And one of his patients had informed him he was getting a hip replacement, that his own mother had had a hip replacement, and that when she had passed, he actually went in and physically removed his own mother's hip replacement because he knew the type of funding that he could get from it to help feed his family. Wow. Which is, you hear that and it's heartbreaking. It's incredibly powerful when you think about, again, the story, the history, how much power, these objects have. So we look at implants as, perfection, they improve life, but these implants also come with so much loaded history. It's, harrowing stories like those that make me realize, again, the types of privilege that so many people have. These objects also speak to, hardship and desperation as well. And, it's a reflection on our broken healthcare system, not only here in the States, but, in a lot of places abroad. So, all of these points in general really impact my work. And I believe it's that type of storytelling that, again, creates understanding through all of us and more empathy through different hardships across the world.
So, following up on a couple of points that you made, do you think that the education of newer generations and the upbringing of new generations, do you think that the history of these medical implants and the history of, and these stories that you're trying to tell, do you think they'll be portrayed in a way that people can understand, in the future?
Yeah, I would hope so. I'd like to make it so my work is approachable, but sometimes my work also has a lot of, I guess, cultural, unfortunately, I don't want to say like a stereotype, but for example, like a lot of, let's say, your traditional male, the stereotypical male walks into a gallery and sees the penile implant. Already, they are very turned off by the fact that there's a penile implant because it's potentially taking away their masculinity, when in fact, erectile dysfunction is actually far more common, across the board than people, it's just like a faux pas. People don't talk about it. Or for example, with healthcare in Roe versus Wade, all of the miscarriages, 1 in 4 women have a miscarriage. It's just not spoken about. Or the traumatic experience of going through breast cancer when I received my 32 pounds of reconstructive breast implants from Cleveland Clinic. I've had people in tears in a gallery. So I think, again, because they're all objects that we can all relate to, and we all know somebody who's gone through these surgeries, that those people might right away feel more of a connection to them or have more of an emotional response if they've had it done themselves or if they know somebody, and hopefully it'll be an educational point to others to try and empathize with those that have gone through these traumatic experiences in their life. I hope I answered that.
Yes. Yes. And if anything, um, your work serves to create a conversation.
It does. It does. Well, and even thinking to like historical medical museums. I don't know if you've ever been to the Mutter Museum in Philly. It's a trip. I mean, they have medical museums all throughout the world. And even if you Google like historical medical tools, like it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Like it's terrifying what
I
they've
mean-
done with people. And you're like, oh, good God. I mean, not only do you just hope it's like sanitary,
Right.
but it's like, no, that was so incorrect. Drawing blood and doing certain things that were just like, you're actually killing this person. And you think it's for medical science, which is interesting now as they're starting to discover more, medications for dementia and Alzheimer's. Who knows if 100 years from now, we might now look back in this point in time and think,
Right.
oh my God, what were we thinking? Because I mean, science is always changing.
Right. That's a very valid point. I've never thought about it like that. So.
Or even like, because I make medical implants, they're starting to 3D print like hearts
Right.
now in different organs, which like we never thought was possible.
Right.
Or cloning of animals, cloning hearts, that's pretty wild. Or now creating medical implants that are porous, so the body is actually growing into the implants, kind of like fusing the body and these implants into one. It's like we're slowly becoming like cyborgs, which is kind of interesting.
And really cool in
Yeah.
a way. So is there a moment in your life, or can you tell me about a moment in your life where storytelling became the most important or was the most important for you? And do you think that there are moments where storytelling becomes more or less important?
Yeah, I would say for me, this kind of leads into like my own conceptual direction. And this is kind of what you were referring to early. Like, do you ever make them like fantastical or hyperbolic? So to me, just in general, storytelling will always be important. It's how we relate to and understand the world. So I think it'll never be less important. It'll always just totally be relevant. So storytelling, again, is one of the most important aspects of my career. It's embedded in my art. So conceptually, for example, like my work focuses on the fragile nature of the human form and is also like glorifying the highly individualized and personal nature of prosthesis and surgeries. So for me, I use the implants that were donated to me as inspiration from my work, but I'm completely hand fabricating all of the objects that I am making. So I'm completely exaggerating them, making them hyperbolic, making them new. And as human beings, we have this obsession with longevity and prolonged life. We're constantly seeking medical advancement. So each piece that I make is commenting on medical solutions yet to be found, or illnesses yet to be cured, or sometimes like I'm inventing diseases and creating objects that cure these diseases, or morphing body parts that kind of do a commentary on, new age science. Again, illness is yet to be cured. For me, I think it's interesting that, all throughout time, this is kind of a segue here, but cultures all over the world have used actually human bone and teeth and hair as amulets, talismans, and relics. This has been going on for thousands of years. And I think that there's an interesting correlation to now, instead of like adorning the body with bones and teeth, we're doing that through like medical implants and devices by implanting them into our body. Again, it's kind of like this cyborg kind of man machine thing kind of going on. So I kind of like that also historical aspect of bringing in like historical adornment, even though I primarily make sculpture. But even if you're creating kind of sculptural implants for the body, even if it's actual medical implants, it's kind of like this sculptural adornment for the body, which I think is really interesting. So like in general, with that said, in making my work, I'm always questioning issues of mortality. And we can all relate to that, of course, as a story. And my work is heavily revolved around memento mori. So when I'm making my objects, going back to this idea of storytelling, I'm making them so when people are looking at them, they're questioning the absent anatomies implied by the work, or for the viewer themselves to be considering their own physicalities when looking at the work. So along with, my own conceptual direction, medical stories are definitely empowering, but again, these stories that I hear from other people, they really expose deep structural issues of inequity, accessibility, and to really who holds on to the power. Medical science, those who hold the power dominate. I mean, just think of how expensive all the pharmaceutical companies are. I mean, that in and of itself is just obscene, So again, I guess recapping, storytelling will always be important. And to me, I think that art in general is a great way to express storytelling. And art is a great vehicle for visual language and for people to all relate to it.